Yeah, Keenan and Cook had some things. You guys and Javin, they did. So I got what I wanted out my system. You guys go ahead.
Go ahead, Cook. If you want, if you got it ready.
Okay, yeah, I got a question, and I guess I kind of want everybody's opinion on this. Now, when it comes to judging players, right? How much? Okay, and one of the reasons I want to ask this question in particular, I didn't know that you were going to mention this player, but then I get on and you mentioned, and that's George Gervin. That's George Gervin. No, so I'm saying that was great. So my question is, how much is it championship or bust when it comes to judging how great a player is, right? Because I look at this, I hate to see people, Barkley and people like that catch their flack because they didn't win the championship. But them other players, some of these other players who did win the championship can't hold their jockstrap. You know what I'm saying? And I look at a George Gervin, I look at a Dominique Wilkins and guys like that I think are just as great as some of these other greats that we talk about that did win. And I say circumstances was in place. Now, George Gervin was with the Spurs. He wasn't going to beat them Lakers with Magic and you know what I'm saying, all that. Dominique Wilkins, if you look at everybody Dominique Wilkins lost to when it came down to the playoffs, he lost to the Bulls, he lost to the Celtics, he lost to the Pistons, and he lost to that underrated Bucks team. Other than them Bucks team, all them other teams was championship team. How was Dominique going to beat them guys by himself? So I don't think he should take as much criticism as he does because he didn't win a championship. So tell me your stance on, is it championship or bust, or is it more to evaluating how great a player was?
Well, I honestly feel that I've always thought that this is a unfair topic because we're actually judging somebody's individual performance based and using something that happens as a team against them. Once again, it goes back to what I was saying about LeBron James. Winning a championship is not solely in your control in team sports. So when we're talking about somebody's career, in their individual career, we're not talking about the greatest teams ever. We're talking about, all right, talk about George Gervin's career. Let's talk about, Alex English's career. Let's talk about Adrian Dantley's career. Let's talk about Dominique's career. Let's talk about Patrick Ewing. Let's talk about Charles Barkley. Let's talk about their individual career, what they have control over. But we're going to hold it against them what their teams didn't do. See, that's unfair. It's unfair and it's unjust. But it's amazing to me how we allow this to happen. Now, I do think that championships, especially if you played a role in them, that's a great advocate to have to build on the importance of your career and your legacy. So it's kind of like, that's fine, but it can't be held against you if you don't do it.
Ain't no top 10 players that ain't won no championship though.
But I think it's lazy.
But that is subjective, because if what are you saying that
if I ask you,
are you saying a player can win a championship by himself?
No. What I'm at, so when you're saying that that's subjective, my rebuttal to that is there any player in the top 10, yours, because it's a subjective list, it's an opinionated list, is there anybody that's in yours who hasn't won a championship?
Probably not. But because they won a championship is not, well, let's see. It's not because they didn't win a championship that I don't have somebody not in there, if that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't, because the fact of the matter is everybody in everybody's top 10 has a ring.
But that's not okay. Like, I'm looking at, let's take George Gervin. Let's take a Julius Erving. Well, let's take George because he didn't win one. if George Gervin won the championship with San Antonio Spurs, that doesn't automatically put him in my top 10.
That's true.
George Gervin without a championship. George Gervin without a championship is better than he may be better than Clyde Drexler. He may be better than
Dirk. Is he better than Dirk?
Paul Pierce.
Yeah, he's better than Dirk.
He might be better than Paul Pierce.
Yes,
to me, yeah. But his thing, Dirk, no, I agree with that. But his thing, if he won a championship, once again, that's not going to make him any greater in my mind. I'm trying to answer your question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think because he is the player that he is. Now it helps if he won a championship, but I'm not holding it back if he did. It's like George Gervin's the player that he is. That's it. Because look, his thing. Does Gary Payton and Jason Kidd move up in everybody's rankings because they have titles that they play small roles in? Just the fact they got it. Gary Payton had nothing to do with Miami getting a title, but he got a title. So because he has a title, he moves up his whole career. He's moved up in your rankings because he got a title, but he played a little role in it. Is that what you're saying?
I agree, Scoop. I agree.
Nate Archibald got a title with the Boston Celtics, and even though he started, he played a small role in that.
Right.
But I think Nate Archibald was one of the greatest point guards ever. Period.
Yeah. I think it's cool to say how a player impacted a championship can boost them up some, but I don't think you say just
because we got to see you performing and you did it at the highest level. My thing is that I'm not going to hold it against you if you don't do it. That's all I'm saying.
I agree.
And he's saying that just because everybody in anybody's top 10 has a championship means that we're holding it against those that aren't in there, and I don't think that's true. At least with me, it's not.
No, not at all. Like Barkley, it does not matter. Now, I think from a standpoint of people's memories, I think people sleep on a guy like Barkley, man, because he didn't, get a championship. But Barkley was incredible, man. You know what I'm saying? George Gervin was incredible. So like we said, is George Gervin better than Nowitzki? Absolutely. Nowitzki got busy to win that championship, but man, he ain't no ice man.
Okay, wait.
George Gervin is better than Allen Iverson.
Yeah, for sure.
That could be argued. And Allen Iverson, what? He's a better example. He's a great example.
Yeah.
Of, a player that in a lot of people's minds, for what he did and what he was up against as far as sizes and the other, and the fact that he won 4 times, whatever, Iverson's that dude, especially in this generation. Now, would it help his cause to be in top 20, top 10 if he did have a ring? Yes. But the fact that he doesn't, right? The fact that he doesn't, are we going to really hold that against how he played the game of basketball and the impact he had on the game of basketball? And I'm not talking about the aesthetic and culture. I'm just talking about what he did on the court.
Right.
I bring Julius Erving up in this too, because he is probably a player during his era was considered one of the greatest ever and is in a lot of people's top 20 probably. But if Philadelphia does not make that trade to get Moses Malone, Doc's career is without a title.
Thank you.
You're telling me
Thank you.
That
and that don't take away. So do that take away how great he was?
Right. That's my point.
Thank you.
That's
Thank
right.
You.
That has Julius Erving did not make the trade to get Moses Malone there. He did what he did. His impact, his game still stands. He got Philadelphia to the finals a couple of times without winning it, without Moses Malone. But he still got there. So the fact that it took something a team did and another player coming there did, cool. But you look at Allen Iverson, who didn't win one. Look at the players around him. What the fuck was he? When was he supposed to win one? When? When?
Thank you.
When was George Gervin, like you said, going against those Lakers teams? When was he supposed to win one? Those Lakers team, that Lakers team had what? 4 Hall of Famers on there? 4? Bob McAdoo, Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy. And guess what? Not only are they 4 Hall of Famers, they're 4 top 75.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell me who George Gervin played with
Three of them MVPs.
Right. Tell me who Jordan Garden played with that had to beat the Lakers. When was he supposed to beat the Lakers? When?
Right.
So
when
now
was Dominique supposed to beat the Celtics?
So right, exactly. So we're holding against them something that a team didn't do. Make an assessment on their careers. I just don't see why we even doing that, but we tend to do it. And I think maybe it is like, as I said earlier, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And maybe this is one of those situations, because I do think that we should, in having these discussions, at least put some credence, not all of it, because you said it's all or nothing, right? It should never be all or nothing, but it should have some meaning behind it. That, titles do mean something. They do play a role. And the fact that you have won championships, that should be considered. But if you played the game at a certain level in a team sport and you didn't win the championship, especially if we do the research and look to see why you didn't win one, then
I think it's very lazy. I think it's very lazy just to say they didn't win a championship. That's late. That's
and
lazy.
hold it against them.
That's lazy.
And, we're not talking about boxing. We're not talking about tennis. We ain't talking about golf. If you ain't win the championship in those individual sports, then no, we can't have this conversation.
Right.
You're not in the top 10 conversation because that's on you.
Right.
If you're considered one of the GOATs in these sports, that's on you. But in team sports, I can't. I've never been with doing that. Just in judging somebody's individual career.
But so another thing that we discussed, that rule only applies to basketball. We don't do it with football. We don't do it with baseball. We don't take away Barry Bonds' greatness. But we definitely do it in basketball. And the response that we've gotten from it has been because individual performances are dominated in basketball more so than they are in other sports. So, Randy Moss never won. So
yeah, but my thing is this is all race based, man. This is where my race card comes out.
Same thing, and that's the same thing.
We only argue about this, and we're forced to be conditioned to argue about this because it's black man against black man in the black man sport.
I told people most.
It's part of that divisiveness that's thrown in it. Right. That's why I'm at on it.
They call me a Trump supporter, but that's another topic. But I very much have said that this is what I've told them. I said, how they say that players are bigger, faster, stronger, and better. I said that topic only applies because blacks dominate the sports those sports now, and so it's a race related issue when they're calling these. Yep, when they're calling these players plumbers and things like that, they're really saying that the white guys aren't here anymore. Right. And so when they're saying that, they don't even realize that when they're saying players are, because we studied the numbers on that. Players aren't bigger, they aren't faster, they're not stronger. The point guards are bigger. That's the only part where that has changed in the game. The average height on a player is still 6'6", 6'6.5". It's that now, and it's back then. You see what I'm saying? So when you're saying that the players are bigger, the point guard players are bigger. That's it. You got the Derrick Roses, you got the Russell Westbrooks, you got the Ja Morants, you got those type of guys now. You don't have the Muggsy Bowles, the Spud Webbs, the Rod Stricklands, and where these guys are playing under 6 feet and those type of things no more. So the point guards have gotten bigger, and that's where it's changed. And then, like I said, now the NBA is 97% African American. Back then, it was 20% white. Mm-hmm. And so when they're saying these things, they're making race statements.
Yeah, it's covert race. It's covert race baiting because of the way the dynamic of the sport and the way it is considered our sport, and it's the only sport in America that's considered ours. So what the landscape. And when I say the landscape, I'm talking about the social media medium and the media in general have found a way to create and embrace this debate narrative and pit us against each other talking about ourselves in this particular sport. Now, I will say this though. that I did recently see one slight shift of maybe this going outside of basketball, and that's with what happened recently in the World Cup. That if Argentina did not win and Messi had not won a World Cup, the GOAT conversation would not be the same. It would have been like everybody would have been all with Cristiano Ronaldo or, Mbappe, are considered greater than him because he does not have a title. That's the only place I've really seen it outside of basketball, that his place in history, his individual place as a player in history was hinging on whether he won a World Cup or not. But that's the only time. And now that he has won one, it's like everybody's like, oh, well, everybody else is in second place now until Mbappe probably wins another one.
Mm-hmm.
But that's still championships, because at the time, even as great as Pele was, even as great as Maradona was, it was still like, even and Ronaldinho, it's still like the GOAT conversation in global soccer was between Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. Now Mbappe's a young kid coming up, and he already got one, and now he's back in the finals. But if Messi gets this gold, if he not only he need to get the golden boot, but if he gets his World Cup title, then that puts him here. That's the only other time in any other sport I've seen where championship, outside of basketball, where championship did have a direct effect on somebody's individual legacy.
Gold status, yeah. Oh, that's real. That's
I
real.
got a couple questions here, man. I'm not sure which one to ask. One of them is journalism based. The other one is about the sneaker game and kind of the modern situations.
Ask both.
Okay, let's do it. Sports journalism. You've been around for a minute. You've seen the evolution of it. You've been here from, William Roden and Wilbon and Kornheiser up into what we're seeing today with, say, Stephen A. Smith, Skip, and Shannon.
Yeah.
And
I'm actually right in the middle. Well, Skip is a little age, but I'm right in that pocket, right.
Right. So, man, I'm just trying to figure out the best way to ask this question, because it's more of a conversation, because it's really been diluted. And I think the information has kind of been watered down almost for a third grade reading level kind of thing. Like, that's not a science that I just throwing that out randomly, third grade, but the conversation for sports. And
I can throw it out there too. It starts off at sixth grade reading level. From a scientific standpoint, newspapers and media are written on a sixth grade level. So there is some science to it, but you're right. And you actually reduced it to where it is now. It went from sixth grade to third grade. You were on point.
Yeah. So let me, I'll throw this out there. Something I noticed in media in general, when CNN started running stories about Britney Spears, like prime time, I knew that, like, the social media piece, Twitter, that they were fighting for eyeballs, and that they needed certain stories to generate the kind of interest to move to drive the business. They had to pivot in some way. Explain to us what you've seen from the evolution of sports journalism, how you feel about it today. Is it less than, or is it just life to you? And is there a way to get back to allowing people that are more interested in kind of more highbrow conversation to kind of find what they're looking for or find what they're missing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, to answer your question, it's just life. It is what it is. I'm a believer that life is going to evolve. Nothing's going to remain the same, and as it shouldn't, because that's how things and people become irrelevant.
Yeah.
If you don't advance and move with the pace with which society is going forward with, then you're going to be a rotary dial phone in an iPhone age, and you're going to be useless. So you have to adapt, to what's going on to a certain degree. Yeah. Now, in this particular case, when it deals with media, sports media, the reality to me is always right there in front of our faces. And you mentioned CNN, which I think is a great jumping off point for this, because while CNN prides itself on being a news organization. The sports counterpart to CNN is ESPN. And if you think about it, the first letter in ESPN is entertainment.
Yep.
So they let you know ahead of time what they're about. And that's what is going to move the needle. By the nature of them playing the role that they have in the direction sports journalism has gone, you could look at that and say, well, this is inevitable. Because they set out to be the CNN of sports. They set out to be the gatekeeper to all things that are sports. And I can tell you as somebody who has worked with ESPN for 17 years, that we used the word intentional earlier.
Yep.
This is intentional. They told me before I even came over there, they want their mission is to be synonymous with sports the same way Kleenex is synonymous with tissue.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't get what I'm saying, is that people do not refer to tissue as tissue.
No.
They refer to it as Kleenex. ESPN is like, we want people to not even mention sports. We want to be, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We want people to call sports ESPN. That was their intent from the beginning when they built the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
So, with knowing that's their intent and knowing that their brand and the first letter / word of that brand is E and it stands for entertainment,
Yeah.
what direction do you expect the narrative and the content to go in? It has to embrace things outside of what has been embraced in the past.
You got
Their job is to be beyond what all print media is doing at the time, regardless, whether it's Sports Illustrated, the Sporting News, the National, USA Today, all the individual magazines and print media that came out that were telling sports stories. Mm-hmm. Even if you're telling sports stories with some of the greatest writers in Esquire, back in the day. But you have no surprise when it's telling stories inside of non-sports magazines, but they're still sports stories. ESPN was going to go beyond that space to create a new narrative.
Yeah.
To piggyback off of Keenan's question, right, and in regards to journalism, and when you're saying evolution and how stuff has changed, I remember back then, people would go sit down with Diane Sawyer. They would go sit down with the top people. The top people in the game have changed. They go into these podcasts now. The Drink Champ. What's the name of the one?
Your voice kind of low, Gordon.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
You back now.
Okay, I'm sorry. So they're going to so the wave has changed. So they're going to these podcasts now to sit down with these guys because of the platforms that they have, the audience that they have. Being totally transparent with you, I really don't care for ESPN no more, right? I don't get my sports that way anymore. I was telling Brian Cook the other day, I haven't even watched the basketball game in its entirety all season. I'm able to keep up with the highlights from my phone. I mean, I'm able to keep up abreast with what's going on from social media and from my phone. It's because of the product, but also because this is just where my information is coming from. It doesn't take me to watch 48 minutes for a game to process it anymore. So what do you think about that?
No, I think that's fair, but I also think that, the first part is it has nothing to do with people going to podcasts because that's where the audience is. I think, to me, it's because of trust. I think, like you said, people would go to Diane Sawyer, they would go to these other, quote unquote gatekeepers in the media. And from a sports perspective, what has happened over the course of years is there's become a divide in that trust factor between the athlete and the journalist. So the athletes have created their own platforms, and there's more of a trust factor with them. Mm-hmm. So it has nothing to do with, the numbers. It has something to do like, no, you know what? I've been in this game. I'm not saying me, but I'm saying the athlete say, I've been in this game, 10 years. I've been in this game 15 years. And all of these journalists, all they're looking for is something negative about me. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. You know, there's been a distrust. But I know my fellow ball player, you know I can be honest with him, and he won't try to look for a negative narrative that's going to find a way to journalistically bring me down. You know, they're going to take consideration what I went through, what I'm saying. I don't have to re-explain myself. I don't have to protect myself the same way I do against some of these cats that are in the media now, the regular media now. So yeah, I could do a situation with ESPN. I could do something with Fox and get a bigger audience, but I don't trust them.
Right.
So the trust factor is, to me, why you see more athletes going to these non-traditional outlets to share space and tell their stories with. It has something to do with trust, and that's on us inside of the media.
Yeah.
That we are the ones that have broken that wall of trust, because we have been so conditioned to think that old saying, if it bleeds, it leads. So we need some type of scandal in order to get the numbers, because at the end of the day, the media is a business. It does have a responsibility to inform the public, but it's still a business that is based off of revenue. And it's a competitive business that's based on revenue. Because if it's revenue you're not getting, that's revenue that's going to somebody else. So there's a rush to be first. Not necessarily get it right, but get it first.